Díodh agus falteróh hig agala bhfuil na misa. Hi and welcome everybody. This is Bite Size Irish Agala Bhfuil member interview, and I have with me a very special guest here tonight, Colleen Snyder. And so Colleen, conas na tá tú inniu?
Oh, guma, yokai orum. Tá ahas orum of a on show lot.
Well, I'm really excited to talk to Colleen tonight because I know she's got a great story, and also we have, although this is the first time we've ever met, we do actually have a little bit of a link. So we're going to find out about that in the course of the conversation too. But first of all, Colleen, could you tell us a little bit about yourself then?
Sure. Is Nisha Colleen, is us America May, Tommy and Mahoney of Linden, Virginia, Sheer of Washington, D.C., Sna Slivcha Appalachian. So Tonig Mo Hinsher, O Huig Ola, O Elon Oel, Egonti Chiroan, Magurk is Slingindom, Tamofado Ahin, Vime Mwilu, Berla Mara Jarachenga, Agus Gridnorak Dovik Leon Oscula. So Anish is Scribner. Tommy Egg Ober Lauer, Fui Fib Slancha Ishtak, Dishkat Nieren, Agus Fui Nafinskialta, Agus Belajas Bancha Lesh Fibsho. So my name is Colleen. I live in America. I'm from America, so I'm American. And right now I live in Linden, Virginia, which is west of Washington, D.C. in the Appalachian Mountains. My ancestors, and this is our connection here that we'll talk about in a little while, are from Ulster, specifically Coal Island in Tyrone County, County Tyrone. And McGurk is my Irish family name, my Sliniandom. So a while ago, quite a few years ago, is I used to teach English as a second language, and I also taught writing to college students. But now I'm the writer, and what I'm doing is I'm working on a book that is about a very unusual and rare medical condition that there's in Northern Ireland, in the Coal Island area. Is this medical condition. And so I'm starting to write about that. And also there is a very rich folklore and legends about this medical condition that is in that area.
Yeah, so doesn't this sound interesting? And first things first, we have to get it out of the way. What's that connection? Well, you've mentioned a few times your ancestors came from Coal Island, County Tyrone, in Ulster.
Right. Yeah.
That's my hometown.
That is your hometown.
So I was just there last weekend. So it's still there.
It's still there, and it has been for quite some time in my family history. I was able to actually last May. I was able to go to Coal Island, and it's something that I found out during the pandemic. Actually, it's a great pandemic story as well. That is where my great grandfather had come from and came through the port of Baltimore into the United States when he was 11 years old. And I think he was with 3 of his siblings, but I was able to go with my sister and see the actual land where he had been a tenant farmer. His father, also named John McGurk, these are both John McGurks, where they had their tenant farm. And also I was able to find in the Clino Chapel there in Coal Island, the graveyard that my ancestors going back to the 1700s, there are 2 McGurk stones, the sort of flat stones there. And the people there at the church, they were able to help me find those stones. They actually sent me pictures later on, these very generous people that were very kind. So that's our connection, is that we both, I know you have in living memory have lived there, but it was my my grandparents, grandfather is the one that came from there. So.
And it's funny to hear somebody mention the name Clino. Clino is the parish next to Colleen Parish, and my dad grew up in Clino, just down the road, and They all supported the Clonaux football team, but we were up the road in Colleen, so we all supported the Colleen football team. So all of these local rivals.
Well, when
and I often mention the place name Clonaux as an example because it's the word Clonaux means nothing in English, but it's really beautiful in Irish because it's Cluin O. Cluin is a meadow. O is the yew tree, so it's the meadow of the yew tree. Lovely name.
Okay.
And it's so descriptive because from my bedroom window as a kid, there was a huge yew tree blocking the view.
Oh, beautiful.
And if you can look through it, look past it, you see some lovely meadows down below. So literally the meadow of the yew tree.
Yeah. Yeah, when you do the research into your ancestors, is you need to understand how the townlands are and where the towns are, and especially where the parish is, which because so much of it was recorded through the church records and things like that. So especially in the 1800s, and if you don't know that bit of information, it's really hard to find out information. And what was wonderful about the tenant farmer land is I was able to figure out, posted online are the ordinances that were done. These are like land surveys that were done because they were tenant farmers. The people that own the land would do this, and it would be something that you could look up online, but also they've taken those maps and they've made a filter where you can put Google Maps on top of it. So you can look at these ordinances, these mapping of tenant farmers, and some of the lands are painfully small. You look at these tiny little things, third of an acre, maybe, tiny lands that people were having whole families on. And you look at that and you can see on Google Maps, and that's how I was able to go there. We knew that it was on the corner of sort of like Washing Bay Road and Clog Road. So that's how we were able to do that.
Oh, yeah. Oh, it's so funny. Washing Bay Road is my home address.
There you go.
It's quite a long road, folks. I'm at number 32, but it goes into the hundreds, I think. So we have so much to talk about, but obviously you yourself were born and grew up in the United States.
Right.
Yes, I am. Is it an Irish-American family? Did you have a lot of Irish culture?
Well, not so much. Yes, in a very strong sense, I did have a sense of my identity as an Irish-American. My mother is the link. Okay, her mother was McGurk. Okay, Catherine McGurk, and then of course through marriage their names changed. But so with my mother, as long as she was alive, now she passed away in 1985, and so until then I had that connection. Sometimes she would tell stories of some aunts that she remembered in Baltimore, or something like that. And also, I went through 12 years of Catholic school, so I had that in my background. And then my actual given name is Mary Colleen. And so I went by Colleen because my mother's name is Mary, so that's how we were differentiated. But, Mary Colleen just sounds quintessentially Irish, and I had bright red hair, freckles, the green eyes, green blue eyes, and I looked very much so. So people would reference me as being, oh, look at that little Irish girl, And so I really had a sense of that and knew my family name was McGurk, but like a lot of Irish Americans, we don't really necessarily know where our families come from, or we have poor information. My mother thought that our family came through Cork. And I found out later that a lot of people make that error because that's where the ships went out of. And so if you don't know where, the relationship of all that, you can think, oh, my family was from, somewhere that you had no idea where exactly your family was from. There's not, especially before the internet, Googling, but you would be able to figure out.
Just the records are patchy.
Yeah, exactly. So, that's something that as an Irish American is a challenge.
And can you tell us about your first experience with the Irish language? Was that around?
Yeah, that was actually, that was quite a long time ago. And when I was thinking about this, it was fun to think back. Is in the early 80s, I was in graduate school in Washington, D.C., and my degree was in literature and language. So I had a real, interest in language and linguistics. But we were taking our literature courses as well. So I found there was an Irish literary Renaissance class with a Celtic studies woman, Dr. Jo Radner, who was teaching a class in that. So I was able to learn about Yeats and Lady Gregory and the Gaelic League with Douglas Hyde, and that he came to Washington, D.C. to raise money in 1906. So anyway, I learned about that. Well, the instructor arranged for us to have a couple Gaelic classes. And so I still remember her name, Sister Bridget O'Malley, taught us a little teeny bit of Irish, not any of it that I remembered, but and then she also arranged for Peggy O'Neill to teach us a little bit of Irish step dance. So that I remember very fondly. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then you do,
Yeah. I love to hear those names too, because they're so evocative. A lot of family names really still make us think of particular parts of the country. And I love the two names you mentioned, because O'Neill, which you might know, is the most typical name in my hometown of Colleen. Right. Tyrone County is often called the O'Neill County. Just when I was in school, maybe 20% of the kids there were called O'Neill. Yeah. And then the other name you mentioned was O'Malley, which is my mother's name.
Is your mother's name? Okay.
Yeah. Well, we're from that region, from the west, of course, from County Galway.
Right. Yeah. But that, so that was really my first experience, and that whole experience of being in that class is what triggered a real interest in me between the relationship between language and nation. And I wound up writing my thesis actually about Quebec, which at that time in the early 80s was fighting for its Francophone rights. And so anyway, I wrote about that, was what I really focused on. And it's funny, later on, I learned that saying of Chirgan Changa, Chirgan Anam. And it just really made me think of Quebec, that a country without a language is a country without a soul. And they very much were fighting and eventually got their Francophone rights, got it recognized as the language, so.
That's so relevant to the north as well at the moment, because Tyrone, if anyone doesn't know, is in Northern Ireland in the 6 counties still in the UK. So it was just last year, I think, some of the final anti-Irish legislation was done away with, and some protection was put in for the Irish language after hundreds of years.
I saw that wonderful the march in Belfast. That was the Jarg Farg. Am I saying that?
Jarg Farg was the sort of the name that came up with the campaign. Jarg Farg meaning red with anger.
Red with anger. Actinish, isn't it?
There was some political issues and controversy, and they came up with this slogan, and they had a very positive campaign. They used the color red. And I think that was trying to keep it away from using the color green too much.
Absolutely.
We don't want to make it about, other kinds of politics. It was just language rights. And it was very positive. Children involved, families, communities.
I saw some of the film from it. It very much made me think of Quebec, when they were fighting in the 80s. Now, theirs was, I don't know if it would be as placid as that. I don't want to say placid, but calm. Like you say, this was like more of a, let's bring the children out. Let's positively affirm that we want to be able to speak this language and have it recognized. And so that was something I found really interesting too. And the big red circle, people had the shirts on with the big red circle and big red circles on their face. And it was just a very joyous looking celebration, as opposed to, of demand. And, I just really liked that the spirit of it was just so joyful.
So you had your first Irish experience at college then, you said. Did you keep on studying then, or did it?
No, especially after my mother passed away not too long after that. I kind of lost that connection and went on to, raise my family. And, I moved away from D.C. There was a little bit of an Irish community there. And it wasn't until the pandemic that lost connection to Irishness came back to me in a very interesting, as you know my story, very interesting way, which that was really sent me down this path, this part of the journey of really to learn Irish. And to understand it.
Yeah, so I know your story a little, but maybe you could tell it again so that we all know.
Sure.
What you back.
Yes. So basically, it's a couple things that came together during the pandemic. One thing you should know about me is that when I was a teenager, or actually it started when I was a child, is I had a really rare medical condition where you have a pituitary tumor, and that causes you to have a flood of growth hormone. Which sounds kind of benign. Oh, you just get tall, but it really isn't. It's a very devastating disease that can cause you to lose your vision. It causes all kinds of joint pain, hormonal dysregulation, infertility. The thing I remember a lot were the splitting headaches. You just have these splitting headaches. And so anyway, I had that as a child, and it was the tumor was removed when I was 20. And I was quite tall then, at least in my family. My sister's 5'2", and I was 6 feet tall. I towered over everybody in my family. And so the thing is, I never met anybody else with it. I kept looking. I talked to doctors, and they're like, this is rare, for you as a child to have this. And so, through time, I just, every once in a while, especially when the internet came along, I would Google it, just, is there anything new about this I should know? Because you do have late effects where for example, the damage to your skeleton starts to catch up with you because your bones grow crazy, sometimes. So anyway, once over the pandemic I'm doing my Google thing, and up pops a paper by a professor, Marta Corbinitz, who is actually in London. And it was talking about there's a genetic mutation that she had identified in Northern Ireland near Coal Island. I didn't know at that point that that's where my family was from. I thought they were from Cork because that's where my mother told me. And I thought, that's very interesting. And the interesting thing was she also had not only done the study with living people, she had done her studies with a very famous Irish giant that is hanging in the Hunterian Museum in London at that point. And he's
in the news again recently, wasn't he? Maybe they took him out of display recently.
Hunterian Museum went under renovation, and there was a big debate and controversy, which is, in a lot of places, the U.S. has it with Native American remains, human remains. Is it proper to be displaying these people? Shouldn't they, is it disrespectful? And so, but, this was 10 years ago. And so anyway, she was able at that time to obtain his teeth. Okay. He was born in 1761. He began to display himself originally near his home in near Magrafelt, sort of South Derry, County Tyrone. Around that area, he would go out and display himself sort of locally. Well, in 1861, he decided to go to London because there was a lot of these like festivals in Edinburgh and in London and around different cities where you could display yourself in these sort of freak shows, I guess we would call them now, pretty untimely, but where people would go and use this to make money. And so he had done that, wound up in London, and then his health just tragically fell apart. He just, all the symptoms, the headache.
He was still a young man, wasn't he?
Oh, he was only 20 when he started. So he was not quite 22 when it all caught up with him, and he wound up dying. Well, Dr. John Hunter is an interesting character because he is considered sort of to be the father of surgery. But to do that, he wound up as an anatomist dissecting something like 2,000 cadavers. And these cadavers, these bodies were brought to him very frequently by what were called resurrectionists. We would call them grave robbers, where they would go in and somebody would die and they would go steal the body away and then take and sell it to John Hunter, who would then do his, dissections. And over time, he had something like 14,000 specimens, both human and animal, and he put that into a museum. And so he had his eye on Charles Byrne. He wanted that body so he offered money to Byrne while he was living, which that's just a horrific thought to me. Here, I will give you money if you give me your body when you die. And so anyway, he did that, and then he got turned down, and then eventually they're not 100% sure how Dr. Hunter got the body. They think an unscrupulous undertaker perhaps, or A couple different stories float around about it, but it's undeniable he obtained the body. And rather than dissect it for reasons no one knows, he just took the body, hid it for 4 years, and before he hid it, he defleshed it by boiling the bones, boiling the body in kind of an acidic solution to remove the flesh, and he just had the bones. And then 4 years later, he put him in his museum as his centerpiece. And Charles Byrne hung there for 250 years basically till this renovation. So anyway, so Marta got the teeth out of this skeleton of Charles Byrne and found out that the DNA, this genetic mutation, which technically is an AIP mutation, is the same one that people living today have. So they're distant cousins, that they're somehow maybe way back in ancestry are related. So anyway, so that's kind of that story. I don't know. I kind of went down the rabbit hole on that one. So
yeah, but it's fast. There's so many great parts to it, and yeah, this is like I said, it's been in the news recently about Charles Byrne, and the one thing we do know is that he didn't want to be on display. Of course,
no, he didn't. It was just heartbreaking, you know. I mean, if you think about it, he probably just wanted to go home, but he had been robbed. Another little piece of the story was he had his life savings on him, and he went out and they think he got drunk and fell down and somebody robbed him of his entire life savings. So here he is, sick, alone, probably horribly homesick, just wanting to go home, no money, and people just hounding him, Hunter offering him money for his body. I mean, it just is just a tragic, sad tale when you think about this. And he's only 22. He's a young man. So anyway, so that's that piece of the story is, we went way down the rabbit hole in this medical condition, which...
you found there's research that says that this region we're talking about in Tyrone is in the center of Ulster. There's a very famous lake next to us, Lough Neagh, which is just a couple of miles from where I grew up myself. And the Washing Bay Road we mentioned, that's a bay in the lake. It's not a bay in the sea, the Washing Bay.
Right.
So this area is a kind of hotbed for this
yes, it's very much a genetic hotspot for this gene. And it's kind of, if you think of Lough Neagh to the east and you think of the Spirit Mountains to the west, going up a little bit into Derry, that whole area is just replete with, people that, stories, legends, all about giants in that area, because that is the technical name of this disease, is gigantism. Its childhood onset is a real marker of it, and then the excess growth hormone, and then all the other symptoms. People don't necessarily get as tall as Charles Byrne. Like I said, I topped out at 6 feet tall, but it's really looked at in relationship to your family, the parental.
Yeah.
Okay, so getting down in the weeds a little bit there. But anyway, yes, it's very much that area around Coal Island up to, like I said, Magrafelt, all of that area. And has this very rich folkloric tradition. So, which I learned about later. At this point in the story that
you mentioned Magrafelt a couple of times. Magrafelt is just across in County Derry, but it's still close to Lough Neagh. Just over in that region, that's where the Nobel Prize winning poet Seamus Heaney was from, just over there. So we've got a few famous connections for sure. But strangely, this is the first I've ever heard, or since meeting you, it's the first I've ever heard of this this condition. It's not like growing up in East Tyrone that we have everybody is. I'm 5'9" myself. I wouldn't really call myself, I'm not tall, but so it's not something that we grew up. Everybody knows about, really, but you say you have found it in stories from the area.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so probably the most famous one is actually much further north of Finn McCool, being, going way back in history, and as a giant and fighting the giant Benandonner of Scotland. A lot of people have heard of Finn McCool because of the Giant's Causeway, that really incredible UNESCO World Heritage Site up on the County Antrim. But the thing is, there's also quite a few other stories that are told that are much more local, and they vary from some that are very much mimic kind of the Finn McCool story of, giants throwing stones. But then again, you start reading them. I started exploring, for example, there's a wonderful book called the Scialta Venture. I think it's the stories of the Munterluni, which is in that very much located in that genetic hotspot. And it has a ton of stories in there. They were gathered in the 1930s. Apparently there was a big, movement in the 30s to do a lot of folklore collection because of the loss of language occurring.
Yeah. So I myself at university, I actually studied folklore here in Dublin.
Oh, okay.
So I have a little link to that as well.
And some of the stories that you feel like they're just these human people, there's one I love that's called The Giant of Cleary, that is a wonderful story about a giant sort of walking through a village, and he hears that a baby's been born. And so he goes over to the house because he's worried that the fairies are going to come, the little people are going to come when the baby is born. There's this magic time where they can be stolen away before they're baptized. And so he goes over to this house and kind of stands guard over the house to keep the little people from coming. And there's also another wonderful poem that was written, and it starts out referencing Finn McCool. But then it starts talking about this shepherd, and he is sitting, this giant shepherd, and he's sitting on the hillside, and he's taking care of his sheep, and just this very human story, and you can just see the humanity behind it. So you think, it sounds like they're describing a person here. This isn't.
To bring it back to the Irish language a little, that region that you mentioned, Munterluni, is it region North Tyrone, County Derry area, I think. I think that's one of the last Gaeltacht areas.
Interesting.
In this part of Ulster. So I've seen books of that, of writings like that from the Irish that was still around at that time. We don't have native speakers. Well, we have newer communities of native speakers these days, but the surviving Gaeltachts kind of faded out in the middle of the last century. And it was really in Ulster. It was over in Donegal in the west, where we still have a very strong Gaeltacht. That area linked to the Irish language, like you said, folklore and all of this. So many connections is very, very interesting.
It's just fascinating. This, the more I went and did research on this, the more fascinating it became. And there's even, I mentioned the ordnance surveys that were done where there was one that Brendan Holland told me about, which I can tell you a little more about Brendan Holland in a minute. But he said in 1836, there was an ordnance survey, very detailed description of them finding this quarry. And that when it was partially excavated, that these giant bones tumbled out that were clearly giants. And so out of this limestone quarry. And so again, here's this report by someone, I think even more interesting, not out of the folkloric tradition, but someone outside of that coming in and making this description of this quarry where they found all these giant bones. Human bones. So,
and one of the things about folklore, I think, really is that what it is often is people in an age where they didn't have as advanced scientific or medical knowledge, trying to make sense of the world. And well, what can it possibly mean? So something like bipolar disorder or things like that, or simply just people getting ill in certain ways.
Right.
That could be explained as being a changeling or something else.
Yeah, I've thought that. I have a son that's disabled, and I've thought about that as I was reading about the changelings, about how somebody being substituted at birth, and a way just to try and understand and cope with something that seems so baffling. I think it comes through in folkloric traditions. Yeah, I would agree.
So you've said that you're working on a book. Does it deal with this topic then?
Yeah. It's basically the book. It's actually, to sort of finish my story is, I was able to connect with Dr. Corbinitz in London. And she introduced me to, like I said, I had never met anybody. I was really hoping, oh, please let me find somebody in the United States I could talk to. And that's when I found out that I was the first person in the United States identified with this particular Northern Ireland, this genetic hotspot, with this genetic mutation, this AIP mutation. So my hope of finding someone in the United States was gone. But he said, oh, I have a person that you can contact. His name is Brendan Holland. And so I was like, oh, great. So anyway, I got in touch with him. And when I first met him, it was in a phone call and this wonderful Irish accent comes on. And it was this as if I'd always known him. You know, we just really compared notes about what it's like to have gigantism, what it was like to find out that, you know, that I had this genetic mutation. And so anyway, that is really the genesis of the book. He had started telling me that he, you know, was very interested in this, had done some writing. He had kept in touch with Marta Corbinitz, Professor Corbinitz, for 10 years. I mean, he had known much longer because her original research was done 10 years ago. Mm-hmm. And so it took all that time to filter down and me find it. But that is really kind of what set me off on this next step in my journey was meeting him and then wanting to go over there, developing a relationship with Professor Corbinitz, also with Dr. Glenn Lowry, who is in Belfast. He's there, and he also studies pituitary tumors and has worked a lot with patients with gigantism. And so that's really what set me off on the next step in the journey, because I started to delve into this, get to know Brendan, get to know, you know, all this, you know, incredible story, and how can I not write about it? You know, I'm a writer, and, you know, I was like, this is quite the story to just drop into my lap. And so, yeah, so I set off on this journey to try and write the book. And so anyway, that's when I developed a website, insearchofgiants.org, started writing the book with Brendan using material that he already had. Like I said, he had already found this ordnance survey with the giant bones in the limestone quarry. He had actually been in 2 different documentaries, BBC documentaries. One was done 10 years ago, and that one, is just a wonderful documentary. You know, we might be able to, I can give you a link for that if you would like. It's called Charles Byrne, Irish Giant, the Irish Giants. And it was done by Ronan McCloskey, a wonderful documentarian in Belfast, who actually is from Omagh, which is in the genetic hotspot as well. Mm-hmm. So a lot of connection there. And anyway, it chronicles Charles Byrne's life. So you would get a lot of details about that. But it also tells the story of Dr. Corbinetz's research, and also Brendan's journey and how he found out that he had a pituitary tumor originally, and then connecting in with Dr. Corbinitz, Professor Corbinitz, and finding out, you know, about the genetic mutation and how it was moving through his family. So anyway, I highly recommend that documentary. And also, like I said, now I've had this relationship with Brendan, and we're writing a book together. So
fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know Brendan myself, but my older brothers and sisters do, and he's a well-known guy locally. And
he is. It's funny. I found that out later. He's just Brendan, and I'm like, everybody seems to know Brendan. You know what is the deal here? So yeah, because he's been, you know, researching this and very much involved in it for 10 years, and through his own personal journey. And then also a few years after those initial findings about the genetic mutation, Professor Corbinitz came to the area and did a population screening, because they wanted to find out what was the prevalence. They knew that this was probably a genetic hotspot, because the question might be, how did she know in London? Well, the patients were coming there because the National Health Service knew that she was the expert. And Northern Ireland, as you mentioned, is you know, under the national UK system. And so they were being sent to St. Bartholomew's, and she was seeing them. And she started to put it together of like, wait a minute, why are all these people coming from the same place, you know? And so she organized, it was something like 10 doctors from all over, Romania, Mexico, just all these different doctors, plus all these other people. And they started a population screening. And so this is to do the DNA testing to see how prevalent it is in the community in general. And so they started brainstorming, and Brendan was brainstorming with Ronan, the documentarian, who was from the area, another great coincidence, like I said. And they came up with the idea of doing this in a Tesco parking lot. So they had 2 weekends where they set up, just one of those porta cabins, okay, with all these doctors and PhD students to gather out of the population. They did a media blitz of going out and saying, okay, this is what this is all about, with Brendan being the spokesperson, because he indeed has the height. He is, I think, still 6'9". So he's a very tall man. And so anyway, they went out into the community on 2 different weekends, one weekend in Cookstown, one weekend in Duckannon, and set up shop, not knowing how many people are going to come. People are funny about DNA, and plus, here you are just going in to buy, some milk and bread. And here's somebody saying, hey, would you spit into this vial so we can analyze your DNA? And so what happened was they got almost 1,000 samples in those 2 weekends. It was astounding to me, that they were able to do that. And so they were able to analyze that. And then they analyzed a cohort in some other areas. And it was much more elaborate than that. But that was really when they determined that for sure what they knew intuitively was true, that this was a genetic hotspot for this particular AIP mutation, technically known as the 304 stop mutation. So
I may have this myself.
You could definitely. Yeah, you could, because they found a lot of people that had no idea that was in their family.
Yeah.
And because you can be a carrier, if you don't develop the disease by the time you're 30, you probably won't. Only 30% of the people develop the disease. So so there's a lot of carriers out there that just don't know that it's in their family. And because it has a relatively low penetrance, that means how frequently it would pop up in a line, so to speak. You could be carrying it through your family. My family, if you think about it, my great-great-great-great-grandfather brought it over, okay, came all the way down. And I was the only one
dormant until you.
Yeah, because I was the only one that got it out of my direct line. And so it can kind of lurk. It's very stealthy and surreptitious, this gene. It kind of hangs out waiting. It feels kind of menacing to me, I don't know, in some way. But it definitely can hang out there. So that is why they wanted to look. And now what they can do is they can follow it. Once it's identified in a family, they can then follow it. And so you start to do what's called cascade testing. I, for example, had my 3 children tested. One of them is positive, 2 not, because each one has a 50-50 chance of getting my faulty allele or not, okay? And so my faulty gene or not. And so anyway, they can do this and do very broad family trees. Brendan has a distant cousin that they've traced back about 3 generations that she had the disease. Also, his brother, his brother positive, didn't develop the disease, but his daughter did. And so they were able to figure that out from that population screening. She didn't know that she had the disease. So, that was another piece of the puzzle that was really important, was doing this population screening.
Well, it's so fascinating, and you have to put my name down to get a copy of the book as soon as it's published.
Okay, good. You'll be my impetus, my inspiration. We're working away. I'm on chapter 9 of 12.
But I want to take it back to the Irish language now, because you did return to studying Irish, of course. And was this also part of your reconnecting and visiting Ireland? Was it part of this same process?
Actually kind of predates that, because, I was starting to do the research, and what I kept noticing was I was just massacring this beautiful language. My pronunciation was terrible. Even Brendan, he just would laugh at me. The map even the English was bad. I had a map that had Coal Island written as one word. And so I said, oh yeah, Colas Island, Colas Land. That's where I come from, Colas Land. It's really Coal Island. much less what I was doing to the poor Irish language of trying to say the different names and everything. So, I've got to do something about this. So I started to, that was really the start, was trying to figure out the pronunciation of it. But as soon as I got online, my whole perspective changed, because as soon as you enter the portal into Let's Learn the Irish Language and start looking on YouTube and podcasts and websites, you stumble into a wonderful, vibrant, global Irish language community that is learning, particularly in the pandemic, online. And so, I started coming across, Dane with Learn Irish, Molly McHale, a Donegal woman who is doing Gaelga in Macree. That's just these wonderful little videos that she was putting out, and all about the language and everything. Una Min Kavanagh. I think she is Kerry, isn't she?
She's a Kerry woman for sure. She speaks beautiful Kerry Irish. It's not even Munster Irish, it's Kerry Irish.
Kerry Irish, yeah, and she's of Vietnamese heritage as well. Yeah, and she also has a Discord server, which I think you're on. So, because I think I've seen, are you on her Discord server?
I have joined Discord, but it's one of those, there are certain social media that you click with and other ones that you never get. So
I checked it out, and I was like,
I'm not really a gamer myself, so I don't know it too well.
Yeah, and so she's wonderful. Gail Gals is another one that does podcasts, and then also Ian did an interview with Kiara Nie, which about creativity. So Bite Size Irish had that well over an hour interview with her, and she is fascinating. She is she started RAC, which is kind of a like reading poetry, all kinds of different Irish cultural things, and
spoken word nights,
rap,
slam poetry, live performance stuff. Yeah,
absolutely. And right away, it was like, this is not Latin. This is not a dead language. This is a very vibrant language that's going on right now. And it was clear that Bite Size Irish was playing a big part in this ecosystem. I mean, it literally, when I looked online, all the free content that you all were putting out for the last 10 years, I found one video of Ian, and he looks like he's about 10 years old, when he first started. I was like, gosh, you've been doing this for a long time, and just about everything. And it's all free content on YouTube, all kinds of interviews, just a couple minutes maybe of a song with Siobhan. Ben doing interviews, you being interviewed. I saw, those, Emma doing all kinds of great things. And so, that was kind of that ecosystem was my first experience with it, of just how much was out there. And that is when I came across a website called LIFA. And I got this idea of, here's this big long list of classes that you can take. And some of them were just way too academic, too whatever. I said, I just want to have something where I can get a little feel for the language. I looked locally and not in the United States, plus during a pandemic. And then I found the Gael School in Coal Island, in County Tyrone. And I looked at it, and they had classes, evening classes, which in the U.S. would be afternoon for me, perfect. And so I contacted them. It was Carja O'Neill, which is tied in with the Gael School, I think on Washington Bay Road, right?
Yeah,
right. And so I contacted Damien O'Neill, good name, right? O'Neill. And, he was wonderful. I said, this is my story of, McGurk, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, that would be fine. Falcha? Oh, wow, He said, welcome home. I was like,
I can tell you, I've known Damien all my life. He's one of my brother's best friends since they were 4 years old, I guess. And Damien has put so much work into promoting Irish culture, and in locally in the area. So he's really tireless about all of these things. And he, they started a hurling club. And Gaelic football. Okay, we're quite good at Gaelic football, but hurling, you never hear about Tyrone hurling. But Damien started the local club, and it's still going strong. They have their own pitch and everything now called Niall Hill. And Damien, he's just done so much in the local area for a long time, and he really deserves a lot of a lot of credit for.
Oh, well, he did great by me because he just really felt me, made me feel
He would
welcome.
be so happy to meet somebody like you who wants to reconnect. He would love that.
Yeah, and he made me realize that, that is pretty amazing. Here I am, the great, 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 great granddaughter of this person that came over, John McGurk, my great, 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 great grandfather. And here I am looking back to Ireland. He would have never imagined that his granddaughter would do something like that, that I would be able to do something like that. And so anyway, they had put their classes online because of the pandemic. So I was able to connect with him and send him Venmo or whatever, him some money, which at first he wouldn't take because he's like, no, falcha walia, we're going to just give it to you. Welcome home. And so he wouldn't even take money from me the first go round. So that was really nice. And, that's when I found out the school is, just like a mile from where my ancestors were. So anyway, and then I took my first class. I didn't even know the alphabet, and good, bless her heart, talk about a good woman, a menage, boy, a good woman.
Banwai, we would say.
Banwai, that's what it is, Banwai. A good woman, she helped me with the alphabet. She taught me my first shonakol, which I have learned how people love their shonakols, is fiar, gleilga, vrishta, na, Berla Klishta. So
my hair. What does that mean for the viewers?
It means it's better broken Irish than perfect English. And I was like, man, that speaks to me because boy, is my Irish broken. So
well, I mean, I think we all feel like that, and at every level, all the Munchori as well, all the teachers feel like, oh, I need to improve.
Oh my gosh, yeah. But,
don't be waiting. I think that Shanakal means don't be waiting until you're perfect. We are all going to make mistakes. It's fine. Right. Just go for it.
Just keep on going. And it was such a welcoming environment. Everybody was a little startled that a Yank was in the class. And I said, yeah, I got the funny accent, But everybody was very welcoming, and they were all sort of stumbling through it. Some of them were, parents that just wanted to talk to their kids that were in the Gael school. Some of them,
well, maybe growing up in America, a lot of people feel like, well, Irish people know everything and all of that about the language, but we have very different experiences of it too. Sometimes we're lucky now that these places like Gaelscoil and Yale, that it exists. When I started primary school, it wasn't there, and I would love to have, looking back, I think it would have been fantastic to have.
Yeah, you can feel that little bit of almost like mourning in parents of, I wish I'd had that. I wish I could do this. Yeah. And, you can
I think that's behind the huge growth in Gaelscoil now. There's so many new Gaelscoil, so many kids these days are going to school through the medium of Irish. So when they do geography or history or Spanish, they're doing it through Irish. And I think a lot of parents think, well, we wish we'd had that chance. So we wish we could deal better with our own language. So
and because the language is being lost, it's coming back. It's pretty amazing, Yeah. So anyway, I took that with her, and then that was in October 2021. So I had met Brendan January 2021. So 10 months later, I was in this class, and I kept it all the way through. And I got to learn all the holidays, Nalig, because they would go through and they were talking about things. And then you come to the end of the spring semester, I found out about the Fanyas. Okay, so the Fanya is, a Scrúdi Fanya is an exam, Fanya meaning ring, and that the first one is really called couple focal, couple words in Irish. And so a total softball questions, you're talking to someone, they're going to ask you a few questions. The goal is just to kind of get through it and be able to stammer out, which is what I did, a few responses to the softball questions, Kajay Anamata Ort, Kajay Martatu, the real easy ones, what's your name, how are you, how's the weather, that kind of thing. And they will give you, and I wore my pin, here's my couple of focal pin right here that they send me, and I was like, oh, you all are so wonderful to honor my little bit of stammering of Irish. But I tell you,
the next goal is silver Fanya.
Next goal is
so silver Fanya is a ring that you can wear as a badge there too. But that shows that's the next level, and then the ultimate goal is Fanya or the gold Fanya. So
Right. So we'll see. I'm studying for that right now, as a matter of fact.
Fantastic.
That's really, and that's, so anyway, what happened was when I finished the couple of focal, that is when I was like, oh, it's not going to be until October. I'm going to have all summer. I don't want to lose. Oh, look, I'm so excited. I can,
Mm.
stammer out a few words in Irish. I can speak a few words, couple of focal. Look at me. And so anyway, that's when I thought about bite-size Irish again. Is I was like, they have so much stuff. I wonder what's behind the paywall. I wonder what they've got going on behind there.
Mm.
And so I went back on the website, and what's really nice is there are all these different membership levels that you can come in at. Some are, I think the lowest one is maybe $10 a month, something like that. But each one is you have a little bit more content and a little more that you're in the system, so to speak, of this platform that has been developed. So I checked it out, and let me see, I'm pretty sure it was a week, maybe longer, that you can do a trial membership. And
Yeah.
so I thought, if it's a week, that'd be great. I can check everything out. And if I don't want to do it, no big deal. So anyway, so I signed up, and that's when I found out about the scripted conversations. And so Ben was doing the scripted conversations at that point, because I found out the woman that usually does it, Siobhan, was on maternity leave or something. And so Ben, talk about Carrie Man, was doing these scripted conversations. And I thought, I am so tongue-tied in Irish that maybe if I have scripted conversation in front of me, which was a little baffling to me, because as I said, I'm a teacher, I had been up and given speeches and all this, and why was I so tongue-tied, but in a foreign, in a different language. And so, but anyway, the scripted conversations were there. I had seen Emma doing interviews and things on the content that was on YouTube. Nice, beautiful, wonderful, friendly faces that all of the people in Bite Size Irish are. But she was doing the Pubble part, and I could see that what she does is every week she has thinks up a topic, and it could be anything. It was space one time. It was, maybe fitness and activities. And then she posts little challenges, okay, to maybe watch. For example, I discovered through her mole scale, which is videos that are put out, sort of like news, like a news magazine.
Yeah, is it connected to part of TG Cahir, maybe, the Irish language television station?
Yeah, it might be through TG Cahir. So, yeah, but they're wonderful because they have subtitles, which is really subtitles. Let me put it this way: subtitles in Irish, which is harder to find. I don't want the English; I want to see the Irish. But anyway, Emma was doing all kinds of great challenges. And so it was very much like a springboard, to kind of get me going again and give me lots of ideas. And then what was really nice is about halfway through is when the rebranding with Ashton occurred. And so that was really good, because while the content was there, it wasn't as organized as it is now. Like, you knew that there were the Corsi and these different things, but Ashter was when they rebranded and reorganized everything, and it was just great. That's when Tusma came out, and Tusma, well, better than I should let you talk about Tusma, but my experience with it was what was really nice is it can be a course. You can go through the different topics, and it starts very easily, with greetings, just some real basic stuff, and then maybe goes to weather, the classic sort of easy topics. Yeah, it gets more complicated as you go along. Or you can use a search function, which you all put in not too long after Tusma came out, of, let's say you want to learn, I don't know, present tense. You type in present tense, and all the videos come up, not just the ones in Tusma, but maybe some of the older videos or other related material. And so you can really use it almost like a textbook or as a resource or a reference.
That's it. I think our courses online, like Tusma, that kind of thing, they are really self-study courses. So you can, and the thing, like you mentioned about classes in person or online, are wonderful, but often they're running at particular times. So there are gaps in the terms. Let's say when you've got an online self-study course, you can just keep going at your own pace. Do lots if you want to, do a little if you want to.
Yeah, exactly. And also, because one of the things that I encountered with the Pubble, Okay, that would be the community. This would be people like myself who have signed
Yeah.
up. They were from literally all over the world. Now, talk about global. I think one of the interviews, in fact, that was done was with Sean, who is in China. And so, and then there's also Angie, she's in Germany, but people just all over. And for example, with Sean, is he would get on there and he would post things that were going on in China, like the Lunar New Year, and would post that on there, talking about it in Irish, but about this thing that he was seeing there in China. And so,
and I guess what Pubble is the online community that we have, and it's one thing about it is that for a lot of learners, you could be anywhere in the world, but you don't necessarily have, and you could be in Ireland as well, and you don't necessarily have a community of people who are learning with you, practicing with you. So it's great to be able to share that. So we're going to wrap up now. So thank you so much for Mila Mahagada Colleen.
Good for listening to me.
As one final question, could you tell us what you've enjoyed the most about learning Irish with Bite Size?
What is the most?
A lot of things.
Yeah, I think, what I think it is that it really captured for me. It was not so much come learn with us, something heavy, learn, be serious with us. It was more about come play with us. Come play with us. We've got this kind of sandbox of language learning tools. I know you did the one that's about the stories, it's the new one with the boot on it. Yes, that one,
the higher level course, I think.
Is come play with us on Pubble. Come check out these cool songs that, Siobhan has got on there. And it really, that's what I think I enjoyed the most, was it kind of captured the joy that I found sort of across the board with Irish language learning, is that there's just so much joy there and people, have a sense of humor about themselves and about it. That's just really refreshing.
Well, I think I'm definitely feeling the joy now after this fantastic conversation. So interesting. We must talk again, and I'm dying to read your book, Colleen. But thank you so much for being here for the interview tonight.
It's Faltero.
So, slán gat duine.
Slán.